All right, everybody, welcome back to the number one television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. All three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing Red Rabbit by Tom Clancy. This book came out in 2002. It was one of the last books Tom Clancy wrote by himself before he started collaborating with other people. And then before he died altogether, and then the story was taken over by other authors. But I've got the hardcover version here, along with the little mass market paperback. I've been collecting Tom Clancy books ever since the 80s when I was a kid. He's probably my favorite thriller writer. And we're going to review this book. Let's talk about the covers first, because I love graphic design and cover illustration. They've pretty much replicated the paperback cover with the original hardcover, so there's no real, the only difference on the back is the author photo. No, that's the same too. So, cool that they liked this cover so much that when the paperback came out, they just said, let's do the fucking thing all over again. Exactly. That doesn't always happen with books. So anyway, let's talk about this book. It's the cover has the Russian symbol on it there in the background with the red. The red. Got to have the red. If we're dealing with Russia. Came out in 2002. This is a direct sequel to the novel Patriot Games. Patriot Games, chronologically, these Jack Ryan novels that Tom Clancy wrote, they follow, Jack Ryan from a young spy all the way up until, he becomes president of the United States some 29 books later. But anyway, these are some of the early ones. But Tom Clancy did not write them all in order. He kind of wrote them, they kind of go, they're all over the place. So even though this is one of the last Tom Clancy books written, it's actually book number 2 in the series. Book number 1 in the series is Patriot Games, which is one of my all-time favorite thrillers. And then that's followed by this. And then this is followed by Hunt for Red October. Anyway, so this has a slow start, I will admit. This has a slow, plodding start to it. It's not got the big flash, sparkly, explosive beginning that Patriots Game had, or that Hunt for Red October had. You really got to wait till you're about 150, 200 pages into this 600-page novel before you really start to enjoy it. At least that's what happened to me. But once I got into it, and this is the second time I've read it, once I got into it, I was really riveted. Really, really riveted. I mean, this is the book where we get to meet all of our U.S. spies, our Russian spies. We get to meet the Foleys, who are Americans living in Russia as spies. We get to meet Greer and Ritter. Even the Cardinal, from Cardinal of the Kremlin, one of his other famous books, has a little bit of a role in this. So anyway, the Russian plot. There's a couple things going on in this book. First of all, the Pope. Wow, that was awkward. The Pope, the Catholic Pope, is from Poland. And he doesn't want to be Pope anymore because he's just kind of like, he wants to resign as Pope because of government oppression and stuff in Poland. That takes this book, I probably should have mentioned. This book takes place in the early 1980s. So we're jumping back in time quite a bit. And it takes place in the 1980s. And in this early 1980s, Tom Clancy really does a good job in this book, as did Martin Cruz Smith do in the book Gorky Park, which I talked about in a few video reviews ago. But in the early 80s, Tom Clancy does a good job of really discussing and showing the reader how claustrophobic it would have been to live in Russia in the early 80s when socialism and communism was at its ever-loving peak in Russia. And it was just kind of you really get the feeling of how hard it was what a disaster it was for the Russians and for the world and for Poland. Just anything around there was just sucked into this socialist, communist oblivion of just misery. And I mean, nobody could. I mean, he talks about how the Russians didn't really, at the time, didn't really aspire to anything. Because what was the point? You were given a ration of food. If you needed a car, you were given a shit car. If you needed to travel long distances, they probably just said, well, here's a train for you that's garbage. If you needed to buy any appliances, there was just one or two kinds of appliances that were produced by the state. If you wanted anything nice, you couldn't get it. You know, you couldn't aspire to get that fancy car or the fancy house because they just didn't exist. So people just kind of lived in a malaise of not giving a shit. Unless you were in the KGB or unless you were part of the political elite. Now, even if you were in the KGB, though, you were kind of like treated, you know, if you were on the lower rungs of the KGB, I mean, you didn't have any more, you didn't get any more favors or privilege than just the average Joe. And so a lot of these young KGB agents would go to surprisingly odd lengths to make a name for themselves, even knowing that their government was probably setting them up to fail, or making them the scapegoat. But they would willingly do it just on the off chance that it might raise them in their career, so they could get a nice car or a nice house. But usually, what happened was they did the assassination or they did the dirty deed that the government wanted them to, and then when shit hit the fan, the government was like, "Well, it was that fuck up over there that did it," and the next thing you know, they're living in a Siberian prison. But they willingly put up with it. They willingly took the chance. And we get a good, and he just does such a great job of kind of explaining how that happens. Well, anyway, the Pope wants to resign. He's just he's just like, Poland is oppressed. Everybody's oppressed. He's feeling this swirl, this vortex of oblivion, nothingness that is swirling in this part of the world. He feels it sucking him into it, and he's just like, I don't want to. But then there's this Russian guy Andropov who's like, well, I'm going to just assassinate the Pope anyway. So now we've got this assassination plot against the Pope, which our main character, who I'm finally going to talk about, Jack Ryan, becomes privy to. And so now we've got this race against time to save the Pope. Save the Pope. And that's basically the plot of it. And then we just get all of the spycraft and all of the political underdealings and all of the backdoor deals from the Russian side and the backdoor deals from the American side. And Jack Ryan trying to navigate all of this stuff as a young government official, as he's trying to navigate through all of this mess. And he's got his helpers Greer and Ritter and the Foleys. And he's got the Russian spies that he works with in Russia, you know, the Cardinal. And so anyway, it actually turns out to be a pretty riveting book in the end. And Red Rabbit, I give it an 8 out of 10. I love Tom Clancy. And so that's my review of Red Rabbit.